All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, today we're doing 2020's greatest successes after we did greatest failures yesterday. And everyone in the comments was like, wow, they're not going to have anything to talk about. And you're right. It took a long time to come up with a couple. But after some deep and pensive thinking, this is what I've got. The first one is actually from the before times. Before all of this virus, before all of this nastiness, there was Russiagate. Let's put that one up there. It's amazing, which is that in the beginning of the new year, January, last time, that we had those final votes on impeachment. After all Ukraine-gate, scandal, the votes in the trial, who's going to vote where, Mitt Romney comes ahead. And you actually saw total and complete failure of Russiagate as an electoral strategy. This was actually something I really had my eye on at the time because I thought it was going to drive the forces of American politics. Right after that vote of impeachment, the acquittal, you actually saw the highest level of identification with Republicans ever in modern history, which means that the Russiagate strategy backfired so hard, more Americans identified with Trump and the Republican Party than ever before. That's actually really heartening to me because it shows you when you focus on this elite level conspiracy nonsense that Americans get totally and completely fed up. It took a debilitating virus and a global economic depression to eventually drive Trump out of office. And the Democrats, I think, got very lucky at the stupidity of some of the Republicans and of Trump's own failures that I covered yesterday. But at the end of the day, it shows that their core strategy, their core thesis on what was wrong with Trump was completely and totally wrong. And it's always good to see bad people fail whenever they do something dumb. The second thing there is about there's no going back. And what I mean by that is the government has sent you a $1,200 check. They can't undo that. They can't undo the fact that in the middle of a global economic crisis, that they gave you something. Now, look, we have been the first here to talk about how it's not enough. They should have been doing much more. They should have looked at Europe. They should have covered payroll. They shouldn't have left restaurants and all these other people to suffer and to close and the failures. And we will be talking about that for many, many years to come. But there were some amazing things done. The unemployment checks, they dropped poverty simply by giving people cash. $1,200 stimulus actually kept this economy half afloat. And the moment that it was removed, we saw poverty go right back up. We saw retail sales go down. We've actually seen the total and complete destruction of trickle-down economics, which I do not believe can come back for an entire generation. I'm not saying they're going to try, but now in the minds of everyday Americans, they saw what worked and what didn't work. And so say that there's another crisis. Say there's another bailout. Say there's going to be more. Yes, there will be nefarious actors and there will be bad stuff within it, but they cannot take that away from you. Once that check goes out, and if another one does, that will be with you forever. You're going to remember that. And that is an amazing and incredible thing. Same thing with the vaccine. I was just talking with Crystal about the Apollo program. One of the reasons I'm so obsessed with the Apollo program is because you can quite literally will the most extraordinary feat in human history into existence in 8 years if you just commit to it. That's what we did with this vaccine. From inception to now, within 9 months, you have a vaccine that is beginning to roll out. Just administered today to the Vice President of the United States. That's amazing. It's one of the most extraordinary feats in modern science. And now you know what you can demand from your government, and they can deliver if they have the political will. You can't ever put that back in the box. We should remember it. It could be our 1969 moonshot moment. And the final one here is about an open playing field. And what I mean by that is, look, this election repudiated some of the things that I believed very deeply. But that's actually comforting in a way. Neither party right now is doing what I want them to do, what I suspect many of you want them to do, which is work and secure the economic lives of American citizens and leave them the hell alone whenever it comes to their cultural lives. But that doesn't mean that another party can't rise up from the future. Look, the Republican Party, they're a total mess. They're going to be that way for a long time. But the Democrats just elected Joe Biden. And I think we know what old Joe is going to be doing when he's in the White House, the type of politics he's going to push. The lane that Donald Trump took in 2016 remains wide open for whomever wants to take that. Maybe that's Trump himself. Maybe he'll delay that charge by another 4 to 8 years because the Dems will just run against Trump. But the underlying forces exposed by this pandemic, discussed on this show for the last 2 years, they're not going away. It's an open playing field for whomever wants to go there and change American politics forever and actually secure economic rights for American citizens. And I find that actually heartening in the way, because basically out of the ashes, a phoenix can rise. And I think that is something which I find very heartening when I'm looking at crises and pasts of American history, which is that in the depths of the despair, in some really bad times, you actually saw leaders who came on to save America 20, 30 years in the future, learn from the mistakes that they saw around them, rise up, and change politics forever.
Yeah.
And that's really, Crystal, where I've kind of been thinking about. I said that yesterday about how I think we're kind of in one of those just terrible moments, like 1919 in America, or like 1931, just these awful years, which we just gloss over in our heads because we're like, yeah, but FDR came along.
But it worked out.
And I'm like, yeah, it worked out, but it took a while. You know, I mean, people had to figure it out.
A lot of pain and suffering in that meantime.
Oh, man, pain, suffering, death, like all horrific lessons that people had to learn. I think that's kind of where we are right now. And I'm going to be forever changed by this experience. I think everybody people who are our age in particular and younger, saddled with student debt and no prospects, I mean, they're going to be radical. I think they're going to be radical for years. I mean, I was saying yesterday, it's like those people who grew up in the Depression, how they're just like penny pinchers for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
This is going to be the same thing. People are going to be like, no, screw you to government after they've been failed. Love it. Right?
No,
because you can't take that away.
Yeah. No, that's my dad, the Great Depression thing, growing up in that era. And he still has his, like, you know, his winter coat from the 1970s that's masking tape together. I'm like, Dad, you could get a new coat. But no, he's like, this one's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
What's wrong with this one?
Yes.
I really like your point about there's no going back.
Yeah.
Because when you think about, and look, we have detailed the failures here of D.C. during this crisis time and time again. But you also have to think about the fact that every single Republican in the Senate voted to send down a check to America. They voted to send out a check. They voted to give $600 additional in unemployment insurance to help people get through. They voted to expand unemployment to include
blew the deficit out of the water.
Gig workers, all of that. Not a word about the deficit during that time, right? And so, again, was it enough? No. But remember, these are the people who, these are the people who came out of the Tea Party, many of them. They're the ones who, you know, even the Obama stimulus, which was way inadequate, and a third of it was tax cuts, by the way. It had all these Republican priorities in it, and they were, like, you know, so opposed to spending any money whatsoever. The fact that you can't take back that the government sent Americans checks, and it really made a difference for them, too, and that every Republican in the Senate is on the record as having voted for that, people really felt that impact on their lives. Yeah, there's no walking back from that. You know, that does make a tremendous difference in people's minds about what the government actually can do for them when they so choose. There was 1 minute where they chose to at least do a little bit of something. And you can't put that back in the bottle.
No, exactly. You know, and this is funny because, you know, I'm obsessed with the moon program. And that's kind of what I always think about, which is that I'm like, how did that happen? We had this amazing thing. We just like went to the moon like 4 times, 5 times. And then we just stopped and America sucked in the 1970s. Yeah. It was like this weird blip on the radar. But in the back of your mind, you're like, no, you can do that, though, whenever you want. And you can demand things. And I hope, and I really hope, that people remain and have that with them whenever the normal times come back to say, hey, wait a second. Like, we can do something bigger. Whenever you say, or you're blaming partisan gridlock on the fact that my roads suck, you're like, no. If you want to, you can all come together. Yeah. And you can demand that they actually do it. Whether that'll work out, I have no idea, but I have some slight hope that in 10 years from now, 15 years from now, that things will be so dramatic. The people who are coming up in politics, they will always remember these times, and I think that that's a good thing.
Yeah,
ultimately.
And we saw a little one of those related glimmers of hope in these last weeks as Bernie and Josh Hawley team up together to force at least some kind of stimulus check into this deal. And, you know, we just haven't seen that kind of cross the aisle effort and collaboration on something that's just directly going to benefit working class people. I mean, that's pretty unusual.
Yeah, it hasn't really happened since the Great Depression.
So that, again, gives you a little bit of hope, and we don't want to overstate it or oversell it or say that anything's inevitable, because the Lord knows that it's not. But it shows you a path of what could be possible if you had a different kind of bipartisan consensus than the absolutely destructive one that has reigned here for so long.
Yeah, that's right. All right, coming up, stimulus checks. They could continue into the weekend as lawmakers are going to haggle over that final package. Washington Post economics reporter, our favorite Jeff Stein, joins us to discuss the latest on negotiations when Rising continues.